critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write our story.
Hey, sorry everybody. So we're here. I promise. I am trying to get Chris online. He is currently somewhere else, not here with me in the Wise Leadership Solutions headquarters in Ocala, Florida. Right? So I'm trying to get him online so we can figure out how to best support one another in this goal of doing things together and leadership and talking about storytelling today. Here we go. Let's see if I can find this phone number here or this email address for Chris. It's been a busy week for us all. So hopefully you all are also having a busy week and you are learning all the things you need to learn to support yourself and your family. Right? Higher Living USA. Got it. We'll go ahead and copy that. We will close that down. Here we go. Send this over to him. Hopefully this will work. And then away we will go. Message has been sent. So today we're talking about storytelling. We're going to be talking with Chris when he gets here, as well as just myself talking about the importance of telling stories and how you as leaders can use storytelling as a way in which you can help communicate with people. You can help figure out what better ways to put out information, what better ways you can put out, I would say, advice that you can have for people and or to get them up to speed. Right. Oh, here comes Chris right now. So I'll go ahead and welcome him to the conversation. Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
Doing good, man. If there was another link, I didn't see it. I got the same one. I just saved it to my calendar, so I don't know. But
Yeah, I didn't use the same stage, man. I sent out a different link. I'm sorry about that.
no worries. I didn't see it. I looked through my emails. I didn't see it, but I'm here now, so no worries.
Yeah. I should have thought that when you said you were online, I thought you were just jumping on. I should have probably registered then that you were running a little late. So, hey, how was your week going?
My week's going good, man. Stock market kept things interesting for sure.
Yeah, I did. Wow.
I had three. I averaged about 350 calls this week. On Monday, I had 67 calls and 8 appointments, and and my assistant called out sick. So I had 67 calls to return in between back-to-back appointments all day, and then people walking in, and I'm trying to run up to the front, run back into appointments, and then return 67 calls. And by the time I'd write the message down to call one, I missed 2 more. And right. I was like, by the time I got home, my hair was like Einstein everywhere. I was like, ah!
Yeah. Well, were you telling everybody just to sit still and chill out and enjoy the ride?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're young, this is a buying opportunity to buy in. And if you're old, you should be in quality investments and have a lot of bonds anyway. So it's not really affecting your portfolio. The only people that are getting impacted are the day traders that don't really know what they're doing. And that's not my clients. So I just had to remind everybody, bro, I've been through 3 market crashes in 27 years. This isn't my first rodeo, and you're fine. And they usually were fine. They just wanted to hear reassurance that I'm not freaking out. And I'm like, bro, I've been through. I watched 2008, 58% of our market disappear in a week. This is nothing. And we had 3 years. We had 2.5 years of bull market, double-digit returns. Even without the tariff wars, we were due for a correction. All the tariff wars is doing is giving the news something to talk about, which does exacerbate it, because when they tell people to be afraid, they sell. And when people sell, it causes it. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. Turn off the news and we'll be fine.
I saw that in the cartoon today, actually. The guy was like, what do I do to find peace? And it said, click.
Turn off the TV.
Yeah. No, I thought that it was I mean, I think it's amazing what's going on right now because some of these tariffs, I mean, I get the quality of the cost of living is different in different countries. And so I get that there needs to be some sort of a balance there. But just the amount of holy crap that we've been getting taken advantage of, and the amount of like just hearing some of the statistics that were coming out today, like from the Department of Labor, and the amount of people that are filing for unemployment and the amount of people that are filing for like disability insurance and Medicaid. It's just, and again, I'm not really surprised because I've worked for the federal government most of my adult life.
Right.
And so I just know how, I mean, when you get told, hey, we need you to spend
Go shoot
$50,000.
millions of dollars of ammo because it's the end of the year and we need a new budget next year.
Can you spend $50,000 before midnight tonight?
Right.
Like,
I know.
why is that a price? Okay, sure. I can go put a million
goofy.
things on order. I can buy all them. And it's just, it's an interesting time to be alive, you know, and it's just watching it all and trying to keep it all in perspective.
Well, and here's the thing. For decades now, we've been dying the death of a million paper cuts. And so, like it or not, he's just fast forwarding some things that needed to be done. You could say that he's going without checks and balance, and you may have some merit to that statement. But at the end of the day, it's like, did you want to drown to death, or do you want to fight the fight and get up to play another day? I don't know.
I think that, you know, what's interesting, and I was not a President Trump fan going into this whole election process this year, right? Just being honest, right? I actually like the guy from Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy, right? I like Vivek. And I mean, I like Trump, don't worry. When I got in Trump's camp was when they decided that they were going to make him go to court in New York and find him guilty of all these freaking things. When we all knew how corrupt all these other people were, it was like, okay, you know what? Now I'm going to pick a dude because that's crap, right? And I remember being out in the South China Sea, in the Pacific, under President Obama, and watching how weak we were, and then how much it changed during Trump's first couple of years. Because I was out there on the water, right, and watching how those policies push back all of our adversaries, like for real, like real, like, and it was like, it was visibly felt, right? Yeah. And then as I was in Guam through COVID, and I was in Guam through the presidential election, and watched all that played out. I was in Guam when the whole transition happened, and you could literally feel the South China Sea, the whole South Pacific region, just completely vacuum, just completely opened wide up, and China just said, yep, we got it. And it all went away again. Yeah. Right. And then I remember I watched Sean Ryan's podcast. You know, he's one of my favorite podcasts. I watch a lot of podcasts. You know, I don't watch as much television anymore. I mean, world news has been kind of busy the last few months. I do watch that a little bit because it's kind of interesting watching the world change. But I was watching some of the podcasts where Sean Ryan would have those people talking about how you'd have government people just delivering suitcases of money to Taliban leaders. Yeah. And they would just be like, why is this happening? How is this happening? And now they're bringing up where it's coming from. Right. And it's just like, why would they even do that, bro? Like, I don't know why. And our generation, our generation is like, we're the ones that went to war over there, or at least it lived through that period of time where our people fought for those things. And then it's like, why are these people continuing? I don't have a good answer for that. Yeah. Right. And I didn't want to believe it at first. Right. At first I wanted to be like, there's got to be more to the story. There's got to be more going on. But now it's just like a whole bunch of corruption, and it's just crazy. Yeah. Kickbacks or whatever. Anyway, I digress. But I do look forward to talking about this kind of stuff with you, because I think as much as I want to talk about theory, I also like talking about real world things that are going on. Yeah. Right. And I think that that's an important part of this. And this conversation we're having here, I want to always try to connect it back to our local community, but I also want to provide content that people maybe are interested in hearing our perspectives on. Absolutely. So today's topic was going to be about storytelling, right? And why you should use stories. Now, my favorite storyteller ever is, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
He was my, I mean, I believe Jesus as one of not just our Lord and Savior, right? But also as a leader who taught. I mean, I remember I went through that series one time where he's talking with the disciples at the Last Supper about what's going to come next. And he's like, how do you guys not understand that? I'm looking for you to be leaders now, to take up leadership on your own path, on your own way. And you can tell they're trying to process it. They're not understanding it. And it was this whole series that we went through. And I was like, oh my God, this is really a strong leadership conversation that he's delivering to them, right?
It is. And, when you look at all of his teachings, or you look at one of my favorite topics, the I am statements, in the Gospel of John, it's all parables. He's teaching through parables, and parables are stories with a spiritual meaning. And every time they ask him a question, he answers it. There's 38 times he answers a question with parables, and which are stories. And he describes himself, as the door, as the vine, and it's just over and over and over again. And it's like, well, yes, he's our Lord and Savior and a leader and an example and something we should strive to live up to, even though we fall short. It doesn't mean we don't wake up and try again tomorrow. Yeah. And if he even showing like, hey, I'm God and God's son, and if you want me to teach you the wisdom of all I know, I'm going to tell you stories that you can relate to. And, their science proves that over and over again. And it's funny. Yeah. When I was learning in seminary about writing sermons and so forth, one of the statistics that stuck out to me is people remember 5 to 15% of what a sermon, but they remember 75 to 80% or so of this short story. And some of the best preachers, it's a story. Yes, they're going to give you the context of the verse, and it better be focused on the verse and the meaning of the verse and not taken out of context. But at the end of the day, if you want people to take that from Sunday and apply it Monday through the rest of the week, give them a story and make it something that you can relate to. Power of story, man, is everything.
100%. And I think as we get into this today, right, that's exactly the angle I'm coming at it from, is that storytelling was not only used by God as a way to communicate to us the lessons that we most need to know to be successful in life, right? And in my mind, success is defined as hopefully returning back to where that is, right? Back to where that place is, that we're at peace and we're with God. And it was a great experience. And we learned and we got the chance to hopefully make impacts and all the other things that we hope to do in this experience. And so he's given us stories, whether it's from the Old Testament, the New Testament. And that's exactly what I want to talk about, because the brain, right? The way you talked about the brain, because neuroscience is going to tell you that your brain loves patterns, right? Your brain, you're going to hear something and you're going to try to find a connection to it, right? How can I process what you just told me? And if you can give it to me in a way that makes sense to me, i.e., again, we as believers, I believe part of our tasker from Jesus, from God, is to share our stories, right? So I can share with you what I've gone through. You can then hopefully draw a connection to it for what you're going through, and maybe you can find some sort of strength out of that. And then together we can strengthen one another as we go forward in life, right? To do good. Yeah. Right.
Well, and on Monday nights, I go down to Interfaith and I work with Brian from Jesus House, and some other different church leaders and so forth. And we go down and we feed the homeless. And 5 Star Pizza donates the food. We come in and we do an outreach thing where we have a pizza party and all the homies come out and it's a blast. But we also are talking about God. It's to give them food and the word of life and the bread of life. But when I go there, I got people from all different levels of understanding and walks in their faith and different places and circumstances in their life. And what I've learned is when I walk in and I just sit down and I tell a story, a 10-minute story, and then we do prayer, it's a magical night. And if I go in there and it's just straight heavy preaching or statistics or facts, theological facts, there's no transformation there. But a story everybody can connect with wherever they come from.
Yeah, because people don't want to be preached to. When I talk to
No.
the kids, that I'm teaching, I tell them about my childhood or things
Yeah.
that I've gone through to help them understand. They definitely can see it and they can relate and they can appreciate it. And then, oh, by the way, it also entertains a little bit, right? And so memory, like you were saying, you may not remember the whole story, but when you hear things that are actually interesting to you, it's scientific that
Yeah.
they're going to latch onto some of those things, and it's going to help them create these scenes, and they're going to think about you when it comes to that memory.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
good. That's great, man.
And the brain, I'm not a neuroscientist by any means, but I've seen some reports about how there's a small part of your brain that
Okay.
lights up when you're processing data. But when you're listening to a story, the same parts of the brain that light up are the same parts when you're actually experiencing something. So your brain remembers it because it doesn't completely know the difference. That's why when you watch a scary movie, you know it's a movie, but it's still kind of freaky. Your brain is sort of processing it as if you're actually going through it. And that's why when you hear a story, you remember it because your brain is processing it as if you're actually going through it. So it does shape you and it does transform you. Where just a plain sermon, I don't want to say that the Holy Spirit doesn't do the work, but it's a lot harder for us to connect with, for sure. And the brain doesn't absorb it the same way.
Well, and they've got to turn on their hearing ears, right? They've got to turn on
ears to hear. Yeah.
There's got to be some active listening happening. Matter of fact, I taught that today, or not today, but this week in class, I taught a whole class on communication because a lot of these kids had never heard what was active communication before.
Yeah.
And making eye contact with them and having that long, slow glit, looking in their eyes, like it feels weird, right? And they're like, yeah, I said, that's energy transferring from me to you. Like we have electricity in our brains. We each have energy in our bodies. And when I go up like this to open myself to energy, it's the same thing when I open myself to you. If we're trying to communicate and you want to put yourself in a space that you can receive what the sender's trying to give to you and trying to understand, right? And not just trying to talk, right? Trying to understand what they're saying so you can have an actual conversation. Because too many people in the world, at least for younger people, they're more interested in getting to the point.
Right.
What are you trying to tell me? And oh, by the way, this is uncomfortable, right? And unfortunately, conversations can be uncomfortable, especially because my premise was having conversation during conflict, because I wanted them to learn how to handle themselves, how to de-escalate a tense conversation, how to not be in a conversation like their parents and feel like it's just going the wrong way and not being able to get out of it before, the train wreck is coming. We all can feel it. And who's going to be the one that says, okay, maybe we should stop talking about this for a second and breathe.
Right.
And let's focus on the problem instead of on each other and figure out how we got here. Right. And but it was just impressive how much they did not know.
Yeah.
Right. And I just very, very interesting. And I feel like as leaders, which again is what one of my priorities is in life, as a father, as a husband, as a man of God, as whoever I'm trying to be on this path, I feel like part of our job there is to help mentor people to be able to have those kinds of relationships, right? To have a conversation. So when you think of a story, right? There's like 4 parts, right, of a story. A good one. There's the warrior's journey, or what's that story?
Yeah, the hero's journey. Campbell, I think it was Campbell that made that popular or whatever, but Star Wars, the Bible. Yeah. You go through the same thing. So you start in this initial phase where you don't know your purpose yet, and then all of a sudden there's a challenge and something comes up and you're challenged. In marketing, that would be the hook, where you got 30 seconds to get the hook out, whatever. You got the hook, and then all of a sudden that challenges you now to step into the uncomfort, where you have to learn more about the world and learn more, of course, about yourself, because the journey really is a journey of self-discovery, even though it's played out in a physical realm. And then as you go through that, then there's the conflict. And so with that conflict, then you have to figure out how to battle it. And in any good narrative, the conflict doesn't end with the main conflict. There's always, the bad guy wakes up one more time, or there's a plot twist or whatever.
There's second, third order effects. Yeah.
Right. And of course, in the story, the narrative story version, not the marketing version, you pick up friends along the way, but each one of those characters represents something you lack. And so you learn wisdom from somebody, the scarecrow, the lion, whatever. You learn something from those characters.
Yes.
And then you get to that point where you finally figured out how to win, and you realize the battle was more a battle of yourself than it was of the world. And then it always is, how do you bring that back? So in the gospel, how do you, now you've been saved, how do you reach back and pull someone else with you? Or in Star Wars, now that the enemy's been beaten, how do we go back to the world and bring back that victory? Or how do I come back from the Wizard from Oz and come back to Kansas? It's always, how do I return with what I've learned?
Definitely. You nailed it. And for me, whenever I'm getting ready to speak on anything, right, I always want to lead with a story of some sort. And so I'll try to always think about, when was the time in my life that I had to deal with whatever it is I'm about to speak about, right? And then I'll try to make sure I frame it as, okay, here's where I began, like you talked about, right? Here was my beginning. Here's how I started setting the stage. Here was the conflict, i.e., what I'm probably talking about that day, because here's why we're all here, and here's why I'm qualified to talk about it. This is a personal experience that I'm sharing with you all. So, and when you share personal experiences with people, it's implied that now you're lending trust to them. They're going to give trust back to you because you're giving an insight into you're lowering your guard a little bit and you're sharing. And then you explain, here's how I got through the conflict to the resolution, right, to the other side. And then, oh, by the way, here's why we're still talking about that today.
Yeah.
Because it's a repetitive process and you have to learn. Here's the good news is you can get better at it and better at it and better at it. And, oh, by the way, as you recognize your victories, you can catalog those in your little story in the back of your head to share with people in the future, right? Whether it's getting out there and talking to somebody you've never met before and getting to know somebody in the space of being uncomfortable, but I'm here to network and I'm here to communicate. I'm here to, you never know who's going to be the person that might change your life, right? And so I teach the students, you don't ever just want to let opportunities go to meet people in a space that people come to be met.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
If we all come to a place to be met, then let's meet people, man.
Let's meet.
You come to school to meet people.
Right.
You come to school to get to know one another, to get to know the teachers, because you never know who in this room might be the one 10 years from now that might be able to help you out or give you a good word of advice or whatever it is. So I think that it's important for people to want to put themselves out there, but also being succinct and knowing how to kind of end it all and on track with what they were trying to do. And like you said, coming back to it, recapping it all. Here's why I told you the story. Yeah. Reframing all the high points, and then here's the salesy part. Checking for acceptance, right?
Right. Does that make sense? Would it make sense for us to move forward today?
That's called communication, right? Like that's freaking. Did you? Because I asked the kids, I was like, have you ever told somebody something and they completely took it the other way? And the girls would all say yes, and the boys would be like, "What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?"
Right? And it's not about what people look. Sometimes to me, it's not what you said; it's what I heard. Right?
I said this, you heard that. Yeah.
You ever watch those videos like on YouTube where she's like, the wife is like, "Can you go get a hamburger?" And the husband's like, "What? You don't love me anymore?"
That happens, right?
100%, because your emotion is clouding it or something. And
well, remember, you and I were in a Bible study. And the topic of Christian nationalism came up. And we're not going to talk about that one way or the other here right now in this conversation. But if you remember, myself and another gentleman were talking about it. And I said, listen, I'm not talking about you personally. Let's just talk about the topic and let's define what it is. And that person was like, nope, you're just wrong. And I'm like,
that old guy?
Yeah.
He was a peach. He was a peach. But we got into some hot conversations.
Right. Well, he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't listen to open his mind. He didn't come to meet. No. He just came to argue. You can't argue with somebody that doesn't want to hear two sides of a story.
I went home a few times and I was like, oh my God, this guy is such an he was maggot to the 1,000th power, right? Like he was freaking.
He's also, and unfortunately, this happens with anybody on a radical extreme, is they do have confirmation bias. They do live in an echo chamber, and we all do to some extent. But they will only take on information that supports typically their ignorant, uneducated perspective. And I don't mean ignorant as a derogatory term. I just mean that as a true definitive of where they come from. And you can't, somebody who is ignorant and their ears are closed, all they can do is argue. They can't actually go, let's entertain information I didn't know before. They don't have that capability.
So I will tell you, I'd say my first 2 years after I retired from the military, I refused to watch television, like the news, because it was so completely disconnected from reality. Right. And it was unfortunately, it was so disappointing that it would make you feel so bad. But I found that if I just didn't watch it, I would go outside, meet people, see people, talk to people.
Get real life.
Ocala's great.
Yeah.
Right. Going to a Friday night football game and everyone's super nice there. No problem. And it's only recently that I've been letting myself watch it a little bit more. And I'm once again recognizing the same challenges where it's like, okay, everyone's freaking arguing all the time. People are just always acting like the sky is falling.
Right.
When there's a ton of really good things happening, but people I feel like they can't just be happy. They got to find something to argue about. Yeah. Because they've got, like you said, they have got to run with their narrative, right? Whatever their voting block is, because they're insecure, right? In my opinion, they're insecure. Their security comes in their position being all the way right. And if their position is at any point shaky, right, then they feel like it's a threat to them. And what kills me is I feel like almost all of us would be in the same building of church on Sunday, though, sitting there.
Right.
Because the majority of us claim to be like Christians or whatever it is. And I'm not trying to throw stones. It's just one of the frustrating parts of the conversation. Yeah. It's like, how can there be such ideological differences between people who are supposed to be theologically very similar?
Well, I will tell you, I am sort of an armchair theologian. I love theology. Okay. And I have a library literally of hundreds, if not over 1,000 theology books that have all been read and highlighted and notes taken. And a lot of bad things happen when you study theology. It makes it harder and harder to go to church because you hear sermons that aren't theologically, historically accurate. And it becomes very difficult and you have to tune out what you're listening to. But what's worse is inside Christian communities, then you get all these posts when you're in all these Christian groups and you get all these posts and then people arguing over it. And as you read them, you're like, you're all wrong. None of you actually understand the historical context of that verse, or you don't understand where that came from. And then you start getting mad and then to me, I feel like that's how the devil keeps Christians busy. He was like, listen, I know I've already lost you for the war, but I can win the daily battles by keeping all you Christians arguing over theological nuances that don't matter. And one day it hit me and I was like, listen, we're supposed to follow God, not the world. Theology, no matter how great it is all man-made because it's all us trying to interpret a God that is beyond our comprehension. So even the best theology that we have as a church, like the Nicene Creed, have all agreed that this is right. Well, that was still man-made definitions created 1,500 years ago that we all decided we'll call that right. And then when you get like a charismatic church that comes out and they all dance and sing differently than a Baptist church, then you start those arguments and then you're like, well, my theology seminary says that women can't preach. And another one says, well, mine says they can. Let's argue over that. And it's like, both of your arguments actually come from a man-made interpretation. The difference is that was it 200 years ago or 1,500 years ago that a group of men decided what you would agree on. And now we're arguing over which group is right. And I realized, wow, the devil can keep the church busy by arguing over all of the things we believe that we aren't actually out there just being the church.
Or not even that, bro, but it gets you, again, I'm bringing up the ideology difference, right? They're not even talking about theological differences. They're out here arguing about ideologies.
Yeah.
These are 100% the idols that you should not be worshiping.
That you shouldn't even,
right? That is their priority because they're not talking. Yeah, and while I do appreciate the law of the land and I appreciate, so my students were asking me, I don't talk too much politics because at the end of the day, it's not my job, right? And so I'm an American, proud to vote, and I do want them to understand the chain of command. We do all that, right? Commander in chief, all that's part of it. But I want them to understand that I would love to. I love to travel the world, right? And so I don't have a problem with anybody. I don't want to have a problem with anybody. I want to go to other places, and I want to know in those other places there's rules and people are following the rules, and that it's safe to travel. It's safe for people to enjoy tourism and go to different places. And I want that to be the same way here in America, right? I think that there needs to be. I agree laws of the land. We should all respect them and follow them so there can be a society. We all get together. And then ultimately, my ultimate rules is I'm going to love people to the best of my ability and not try to worry about all the other stuff because I don't have the time or the energy to not like people, right? That just takes way too much freaking energy. Even though I've got people that can ruffle my feathers, right? Right? If you're not trying your hardest and if you're in my network, I will get frustrated. I guarantee it.
I get frustrated too. I have a certain standard and I get frustrated.
If you tell me we're trying to do it, let's do it, bro. But if we're not going to try to do it, I don't want to get my hopes up. So don't tell me you want to work on something and then we're not going to do it.
Well, I was leading a group that it was kind of the same thing. And I said, listen, we're going to have 7 meetings. There's 7 to finish this. I don't care if you come or not. I'd love to have you. But if you do come, we're all working together. So you have to commit to all 7.
Yeah.
And so if you raise your hand and say, I'm in, you have to be here 7 weeks in a row because we need you. If we build this and delegate things, we need to know we can count on you. And then we started. And by week 4, we were down to 1/3 of what we started with. And I paused and I said, and this had to do with church stuff too. And I paused and I said, listen, y'all, I have a fundamental problem with you now. And this has nothing to do with your faith or calling your character out as a Christian or whether or not you're saved. I'm calling you out as a man. And I'm saying, if you raised your hand and said, I'll commit to a team, and then you let the team down because you're too tired to come on a Monday night, what kind of person are you, let alone Christian? And so I just have a problem with you as a man. And I said that. And of course, that's probably why no one wanted to come back after that. But it was true.
You know what? And that just says, I mean, if you have boundaries and if you have standards, right, it's okay. It's just they're not built for, and look, they're not built for that opportunity at that moment in time. And my thing is, you were very upfront and honest with them. This is what I want to do because I'm going to put in the best that I can put in. And a lot of my allies in life are highly functioning people.
Mine are,
and that's it. And it's exhausting. Yeah. Right. It could be exhausting. That could be true, but it's also iron always still sharpens iron. Right. And
and my wife has to tell me at least 3 times a week, Chris, not everybody holds themselves to the same standards you hold yourself to. And I give 110. If I say I'm in, I'm 110 in. I mean, will I make mistakes? Absolutely. But will you get my heart? Will you get my commitment if I say I'm in? Yes. And that happens in work, that happens in church, that happens in family. If I say I'm in, I'm in. And if I promise you I'll do it and I'm tired or I have a migraine, I'm going to do it anyway. And when other people are like, Chris, man, I've had a tough day. I'm going to have to call out tonight. I'll be back next week. I'm like, what's wrong with you? And then my wife's like, Chris, you can't be mad at them. That's how 90% of the world operates. And I'm like, well, I hate 90% of the world then. Like, I don't understand it. And she's like, calm down. You have to love them where they're at. And I'm like, well, I don't like them where they're at.
Yeah. You know, oh my God, that's so funny. When I became a command master chief, I purposely had to lower my standard, my personal standard. Purposefully.
That's hard.
But I had to, because I'm no longer just getting to be myself. I'm now the representation of the Navy as a brand, right? And so the Navy standard is acceptable, right? Not the Gary Wise standard.
Yeah.
So all the Navy standard said was your boots should be blackened. They don't say they got to look like mirrors or glass, right?
Yeah.
So that was one of my calling cards coming up through the ranks. I would always
too. I could spit shine,
crispy, right?
Magic.
But I stepped away from that on purpose because I wanted to be approachable by the people that maybe weren't looked at through that lens, right? And
now you sound like my wife.
Well, it's just you have to understand that when you put yourself in this space, especially to represent an organization that's bigger than you,
right?
Their standard is the important part, not your own. Now, my boss in Guam taught me, phenomenal human being. My boss at Guam taught me. He said, "All right, Mash, if I get that, but here's the deal. If I can raise my standard above my boss's standard, then I will never work for him ever a day in my life." because I'm over their standard.
You're
And I
over.
said,
Yeah.
you're right, provided you're not doing anything that he doesn't agree with to get over that standard. And that's the only caveat, because sometimes people can get frustrated when we make them get to that higher standard when they know that other group is not there, this other group is not there. I've learned instead, I will appreciate you for who you are, where you're at, and just recognize that you're not the one that I need to put that level of energy into, and cut bait, right? Because it's just going to exhaust you.
Yeah.
Try to get them
You
to
feel like you're
normalize
dragging
that
people up a
level.
hill, and you're like, you're a grown man. Why am I babysitting an adult?
Here's the other thing, right? Is I've learned when I lead large teams, if I can lead them to getting me 70 to 80% of the way there, I can get us across the finish lines. Because the other thing is, I know it doesn't have to be perfect. It does not have to be perfect. I would rather get it done than have it be perfect. Because one, get it done, pass whatever objective you got to pass, and then move on, because there's always something else.
There's
There's
always
the next one, right? And
That's true.
they're going to learn their lesson. You're going to learn your lesson. And then what I've learned is throughout that process, I'll keep a few of them that were really the ones pulling the most weight for the team, and I'll feed them opportunities for the future, right?
Yeah.
And then you build a team of people that are looking for opportunities. And that's, again, one of my gifts that I've learned. One of my creative abilities is I can smell potential on people. I can smell it on them. I can see their potential, and I love giving them opportunities to help them try to develop it and try to put them in spaces for them to recognize what they got.
So I actually have a fault with that. I agree with you. I see potential in people all the time, and I mentor a lot of young men, and I have some mentors myself. I think everybody should have a mentor, at least one or two, and I think you should be mentoring at least one or two, if not more. And I think you develop from both of those, actually. But I will tell you this: I see potential in people, and I might say, hey, I see that you could be, I'll just say 100% for this analogy, but I see you living up to 60, and I know you have this potential. What can I do to help you get there? But then when I see some of them take that and run with it, and I love it. I love seeing their lives change. I love seeing them do better, make more, whatever, impact more. Yeah. But then I also see others where I still see the potential, and they're wanting me to mentor, but then week after week, they're still stuck in the same place. And I'm like, you're not taking the ball anywhere. And that frustrates me, because I'm pouring my energy into these people that claim to want it, and they're lying to themselves. And therefore, I even have to ask, do they really have the potential, or am I just an optimist?
Brother, you're not wrong. And so just, again, for me, a few of my basic rules, right? For all of my mentors that mentor me, they all have the same rule in my book, and that's I can't tell them no. The minute I tell my mentor no, they're no longer my mentor. They're now like my friend, and we're going to argue, right? We're going to debate. And, I don't mind that.
Friend and mentor are two different lines, though.
Yeah. And so for my mentors, right, typically they're giving me advice. I'm typically going to do it because I came to you for mentorship, right? Mm-hmm. And I've had people that I've mentored that have now risen up past me, right? And
I have too.
And we'll recognize it when we disagree on something, and all of a sudden we're arguing. And I'll recognize, okay, they've now evolved and we're no longer in the same space. And that's great, but now it's a different role, right? So my rule for my proteges is you can't tell me no.
I like that. Or that role is done.
You can't. And so because they would come to me and they would ask me, and they still do, they would ask me to formulate, hey, what do you think? What do you think? And I would do it, but I like to formalize the process so that we understand what we're trying to get out of this agreement, right? And my favorite thing to do is to mentor people through a project, because I can have some sort of status. I can mark it. I can see where we're going, and there's an end to it where we can take a break, right? Because I'm relentless. I don't want to burn them out, right? I want to,
because it never stops. Like you said earlier, it's always tomorrow's always another day to fight. Yeah,
it's the exciting part about life, right? Like we wake up every day. I had a young lady today that we were walking, and the goal was for us to go 4 laps, which was going to essentially be about 3.5, almost 4 miles. She was crying by lap 2, right? And I was like, we are not stopping. We are not going to stop. You and me are going to keep on going. And by lap 3, she got her second wind, And
love
by
that.
lap 4, she was just trekking. And then I had her convinced we were going to do another lap. And then we did half a lap, right? But she was convinced we were going to do it.
Right.
And that was a mentorship process, right?
Sure.
And she couldn't tell me no. You couldn't tell
Yeah.
me no. Now,
Plus that second high, that second runner's high or whatever is awesome.
well, and you have to, and then you're always giving them check marks, right? Hey, you just passed 2 miles. Hey, you just walked 2 freaking miles. When have you ever walked 2 miles without stopping before
Right.
at this pace? Oh, by the way, other people were running, right? Because I'm conditioning them for something. But fatigue, working out is a space where you can challenge your mind. The other thing for me is I recognize when people do not value my perspective, right?
Mhm.
I'm a teacher. I've got over 185 students. I will 100% tell them when it's the last time I'm going to give them any personal advice, because I'm not going to continue to try to offer you personal advice when you're just going to continue to not follow it, right? I can give you all professional teacher stuff all day long.
Yeah.
I don't have to give you the other part of me that's really intently trying to get through to you to work something out. And so then that's when they get worried. Oh my God, Master Chief, why are you not going to tell me?
Wait.
Because you keep not listening.
So I do that when it comes to like financial planning. I'll have some people that I tell people I won't work with you unless you're QCC, qualified, coachable, and committed. That's my rules. You said you can't say no. I say you have to be QCC, and the moment you're not, we're done. So qualified means you have a problem or a challenge that I actually know how to help, because I don't know how to help everything. If I can't help you, I'll tell you. So you have to be qualified. You have to be coachable, meaning if I say it, you're going to do it. So that's kind of like your can't say no thing, I guess. And then you have to be committed. If we set a goal, you have to work toward it. Don't say, well, this came up and then my wife's this and then my car and then I don't care. I don't care. You run 3 miles every day, whether you're sick or not in the military. And that's the same thing. You're committed. If you're not, then I'm not going to be committed either, because I have plenty of people to work with. And I tell clients, you have to be QCC or we're not going to work together.
When I was in boot camp, my chief, one of my boot camp drill instructors, he was supposed to take his family to a family trip on the weekend, right? And I knew about it. Well, I'm to the end of boot camp. I'm to the end of basic training, right? Like chief is treating us like normal people. We're almost done. And it's Friday night. I've got a late watch in the little open bay dormitory that we're all in. And chief comes walking in. And I was like, Chief, what the heck are you doing here? I thought you had a family thing. You were not going to be here this weekend. He was like, I've got duty. And I was just like, I didn't, now looking back on my career, I better understand what was going on. He said, Wise, I'm going to tell you something right now. In life, things are going to happen that are beyond your control. And you can either whine, moan, cry, complain about it and try to stop whatever's going to happen from happening, or you can recognize what's beyond your control. You can take care of your business, get what you got to get done, and then provide feedback that people will recognize that you were the bigger person in that moment. And I've carried that with me my entire life, because I don't even think I barely had conversations with that man, very, very few conversations. And he taught me one of the most solid life lessons. And that is, when things are coming at me, and I taught this to my students, I would rather take ownership of the response and ownership over whatever's going to happen next, vice make a bunch of excuses as to why it's happening and I can't control it. Right. Yeah. And to that other point of, you gave me something to do and I had a bunch of things come up. All that's great. I'm not going to get to gap. You're not going to see my face again till I got that damn thing done. Yeah. And then I'm going to tell you it's done. And then I'm going to tell you all the other things that happen as well. But if I come in front of you and try to get more time or whatever it is, look, and I don't mind if you need more time, say you need more time, but I need to know sooner that you need more time, not when it's due, not what days. Hey, so back on the storyline stuff, because I love these conversations, bro. This is why I knew this is going to be a lot of fun, because I think the people need to understand that we're telling stories, we're building stories and stuff. And I think that stories will help you to maintain your heritage, right? Your family histories, right? Telling the stories of your fathers, your grandparents, when you were a child. Look at the Torah, right? Look at how they were passing on the Old Testament before they had really, really solid ways to keep it around forever.
Absolutely.
They would memorize it and tell. Look at the Aboriginal people, right? And how they would memorize stories. The Native Americans.
Well, right? Yeah, like you said, the Torah, when you look at Genesis, I mean, all of those stories, I don't want to go too far with this and get into theological debates with people, but the point is, all of those stories, as you can look at like Gilgamesh and all that, those stories were all true way before Moses wrote them down. And when you look at them, you'll see the epic flood and multiple heritages or cultures and so forth. And to me, that all that does is support, because it happened. Yeah. And it just so happens that Moses was the one that gets the credit for writing it down, and he did. But ultimately, those things happened, and those stories were passed down before they got to Moses actually putting pen to paper, so to speak.
And they're using the stories metaphorically to communicate a message. Oh, by the way, there's what really happened, but here's the lesson that we took from it, right? I remember one of the ones we did, one of the lessons we did, I think it was on Job. We did a series on Job, and the teacher that we were watching the video on was, what if this was not a real person, but what if this was a parable or a story meant to get across to us all of the experience of this person? And I'll never know if that's...
And it very well could be, because that one, we don't know the author or the timing of it. Just, we kind of shove it in there somewhere.
I will tell you what, I incorporated so much more out of that teaching by allowing it to be in my mind as a story, by me questioning all of the things and like, how did that work? And how did that work? And I think that it's important because it allows you to accept things. It gives you the space to accept things that you typically may not. I can't see it, touch it, smell it, taste it, hear it. Right. But I can accept your story. I can incorporate that into my personal philosophies of life. And then I can live my life in that code in alignment with. Yeah. Another thing stories do, they build communities. You can share your story with people and it will resonate with them. Right. It will resonate and they will connect with it and they will identify as, you are one of me. I am one of you. We are on the same page, the same team. Yeah. And I love when I hear.
I think that's the truth too when it comes to the military or even a sports team. You know, like I know as a Marine, our pride comes. We tell the stories of the frozen chosen reservoir, and we talk about Tun Tavern. And it's those stories that make you feel like you belong to something that's bigger than you, something with rich culture, and that just is just bigger than you. And the same thing, I think, with sport teams. I remember reading an article one time, and they talked about like a sports team. You have to realize, those players, let's look at a college team. I'm a huge Gator fan. Those players are there 3, 4, 5 years and then move on. So it's not that I'm in love with the players. And it's like, well, is it the coach? Well, those coaches, especially in the SEC, are rotating out every few years. So it's not the coach. And you're like, oh, so I guess it's the uniform? And the uniforms change, especially if you're Oregon, every week. Yeah. And so it's like, so what is it that you really love? If it's not the players, it's not the coach, it's not the uniform, what is it you're really in love with? And you're just in love with the story, the culture of who that team is. And that story is passed down, whether you're the rowdy team or you're the holy team or whatever, Notre Dame, whatever. It's the story.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking Notre Dame, man.
Yeah.
Rudy.
Yeah.
Right.
Rudy. The story.
Rudy. Yes.
And now if you go to Notre Dame, you feel like you're part of that.
100%. No,
anyway.
It's an institute. It's a brand. It's an institution, right? And that connects people. And I think that, the other thing I think is when you learn that the story is not all the way true, and then you find out the real thing, what happened. Like I would say, I love some of the movies that have come out recently about the settling of the Old West. Right, because I'm from Utah. My family, my forefathers, my ancestors joined the Mormon Church. They moved from Scotland and England to America. I
remember you told me.
They immigrated. They walked across the trails. They helped to settle in Utah, and it was rugged. It was not sexy, right? It was not cute what they went through. Settling of the country. Some of these movies that have come out recently, you see how bloody it was, how tough it was, and I think that people need to not always fantasize some stories, but they need to recognize, like, okay, what's the real truth behind certain things, so we don't lose focus as to the lessons there as well, right? I think that you know, when they use certain titles, they call people certain names, for example, and they draw parallels between certain people in history and current events today. It's like, brother, that's got nothing to do with what happened like during pre-World War II or during, you know, it's very hard to compare anything to, you know, Pearl Harbor, right?
Yeah, right.
I would just be, I could never imagine what it would be like to live on Pearl Harbor the day they got attacked, right? I could never imagine what that 9/11, right? Living in Manhattan, being downtown in that time period, I could never, whenever I hear somebody compare, oh, that's the new 9/11. Like, I don't know that we can say that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate how you're trying to connect it, the sentiment, but the real story is way, 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 way more significant. I think that the other thing is cultures help people. And so that's my point is cultures and stories evolve over time, right? And you're going to see changes in society as they go. And to your point about Gilgamesh, right? If you want the stories of the flood or the different flood stories that are around the world, because I get sucked into the rabbit hole on those things on YouTube all the time.
I've been down those rabbit holes a few times.
It's fun.
It is fun.
It's fun because I think there's something to having lived in Japan for all the years I lived in Japan, having lived in Guam, having met so many different people from so many different cultures, and then hearing how all these different cultures have very similar theological, historical conversations and or stories that are super similar. I was watching a YouTube video the other night about the Yahweh before Israel, right? And about the people that were following Yahweh before Israel came out with his religion, right? And it talked about Melchizedek. It talked about how Melchizedek was already labeled as a disciple. And I read another story one time where it said he might have actually been God.
I was going to say, so in my studies, Melchizedek is a Christophany, meaning he's a precursor to Christ, but he is Christ.
Right. And I've heard that one too.
That's
right?
the one I subscribe to.
And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that, right? Because I do believe that there's other people in the world, even before we were told about the people in the Bible, that probably had connection with God. They just maybe didn't have it through the same lens or the same connection. But I think there's always been room for everybody in the conversation, right? I mean, I think that's just now the prophets were they only laid it down one way, right? But I still think, that there was stories that give a lot of people insights as to what happened in the history of the earth,
right? That
might actually ultimately correlate. And I wouldn't be surprised when I die to find out that they were all somehow connected, right? And that they all just kind of someone told somebody a story and it went away.
So here, this is something that I've stumbled into, a rabbit hole I've stumbled into years ago, and I hold on to it, and it makes some people uncomfortable, but I think it makes a lot of sense. You know how there's 400 years between Malachi and Matthew, Old Testament and New Testament. Other than the book of Maccabees, that is in like the Catholic Bibles, but not in the Protestant Bibles, there's not a whole lot of history that tells us what happened for those 400 silent years, the intertestamentary period. And what's interesting to me is I went through in college, I studied philosophy also. And what was cool to me is like Aristotle, Plato, that kind of stuff, that all was happening in Greece during those 400 years. And here's why that's significant to me. Before that period of time, we had nomadic farmers. And so God was responsible for bringing down the rain and making the crops and bringing in locusts and stuff like that. Yeah. If you tried to go and you tell those farmers philosophical stuff, so like in the beginning was the word and the word was with God and the word was God, they don't even know what the word means. It logos. And so they'd be like, huh? Did he make it rain or is it not going to rain today, bro? Like, and so during those 400 years, the human mind through society and evolution of our culture, society, humanity, we learned to think philosophically. So now all of a sudden, when you have the books like the parables and you have the spiritual gospel of John talking in all of these kind of riddles and sort of stuff in a philosophical way, it makes sense. And it wouldn't have made sense if John came in and started talking to the same people that Jeremiah and Isaiah were prophesying to. If he came in and tried to talk the way he talked about Jesus, people would have been like, what are you talking about, bro? You're weird. And so to me, I think it's kind of cool that I feel like God obviously knows everything. And he was like, look, you guys aren't ready for what I got to tell you next. I'm going to allow you guys to mature a little bit, and I'm going to give you some philosophy. And when you guys are ready to hear everything else about Jesus, I'm going to tell you. And so to me, a lot of people get in and argue like, don't follow philosophy. Those are the vain teachings of man, not the word. And I'm like, bro, no. If you look at it historically, philosophy is what made it so that we could truly understand to the best of humanity's ability on this side of eternity who Jesus is. So I actually love it. And those are stories.
Well, and especially that it has the Greek context, right? Because
Right.
the Greeks were so important in making sure the storylines move forward. And again, the Bible being one of the most important storyline in the world, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So I think that there's just no way we could have this conversation and not talk about the Bible. And I knew that from the beginning. As I was thinking about what we were going to talk about, I was like, we got to talk about the Bible, because it is without a doubt the most important story that you can use the Bible in so many different ways to communicate with people. Or even if I change the names, I just use the story, right? Conflict resolution, right? Conflict resolution. Okay. The prodigal son.
Yeah.
How many times have you used that story to get across to somebody why they should stop being petty about something? Because just because somebody's happy, don't be the person that's got to spoil someone else's happiness because you're feeling violated right now, right? Like, don't make it about you, bro. Like, not everything's about you.
I was feeding the homeless on Tuesday afternoon, and we ran out of food. And we had 80 people 80 families came through, and we ran out of food. And the 81st person came in and was upset. But all I could think of was the work. I forget the title, but the parable of the workers. The ones the first ones that came in the morning got paid, and then the afternoon got paid, and then the guys that came and worked 5 minutes got paid.
They get the talents. They got the talents.
It's one of the talents. But the problem was the guys that came and only worked for 5 minutes got paid the same thing, and then the guys that got early were like, wait a minute, that's not fair. And it's like, it's not about, none of it's fair. If we all got what we deserved, we wouldn't have anything. That's the point.
Yeah.
Jesus gave us what we didn't deserve. But I was thinking about her because she was yelling at us, cussing at us. This isn't fair. This isn't right. I took off work to be here and I want my free food. And it's like, you're literally yelling at volunteers that took time out of their work to feed people. And you're yelling at us because we ran out. How are we the bad guy? And you need to maybe check yourself. We didn't say that. I just said, ma'am, I understand how frustrating this could be, and hopefully we could do better. But I apologize. When we're out, we're out. And but the reality was, I was like, man, what?
That's another great story though, bro. Like, and that's exactly a good connection to that story, because you're reminded people, you're reminded anybody listening, you're reminding anybody that story was right. Essentially, you got the fair wage, not just for the amount of time you spent, but for what you came willing to do or not do.
Right.
Right. And then you got the people who started worrying about what they didn't get. Right. And when you start worrying more about what you're not getting,
right,
you're not focused on what you are getting. Right. And then, oh, by the way, how about we have the conversation as to how you even got yourself in that position to begin with? Right. Well, if I'm ever in the position where I feel like I'm frustrated because I'm not getting what I feel like is fair to me, I'm almost always going to, number one, look at it and think, okay, why am I insecure? Right? Because it's an insecurity, right? If they're being mean, I'll own it. They're being mean. If they're not being mean, it's just life is playing out the way it plays out. And I felt like something happened unfair. If I'm not insecure, then how did I let myself get in this position where I was relying upon that person to give me that opportunity? Because then I'm gonna learn from that, and I'm gonna get better. Yeah. I'm gonna get better. And oh, by the way, I'm gonna ask for feedback. I'm gonna ask for information, and I'm not gonna hate on the other person that got the thing to the best of my ability, because I can be frustrated, right? I can be a little annoyed, especially like professionalism. When I was coming up through the ranks and like trying to make senior chief or master chief, trying to get a higher evaluation, or because in the Navy, there's only so much, how it is. There's like pyramid rankings, and there's only so much room for people. And the higher ranking you got, the better your chances at promoting. The more you promote, the more you got paid, the better the validation, all these things, right? And so I would teach people, I don't want you to have to rely upon me to give you that ranking. I want you to
Right.
do so much great things that it's undeniable for you,
Undeniable. That's the word.
right? And oh, by the way, you probably don't even care about the ranking anymore because you got so much other things going on good in your life that you're not going to get wrapped around the axle on just that one thing. And
Right.
don't become so don't idolize the thing when you're breathing, you're healthy, you've got a lot of really good things happening in your life. Don't lose your mental health on this thing that's possibly not going to bring you the satisfaction you're looking for. That lady was hungry. I wish her job. I'm glad she got a job, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad she's working, and I would like to think she's. I remember working at the food bank back in San Diego, and people would literally walk in the food bank, coming off their cell phone, getting free lunch.
I know, and they're back in their car
Yeah.
or whatever, and you're like,
Yeah, and I'm
bro,
just
there's
like,
people
why
that
are
need this.
you take? But they're taking advantage of it because the food's not bad.
Yeah,
and
she
because-
was that person, by the way. That she on her cell phone complaining she took off work to get back in her car to go back, and it's like there's people literally walking in and off the streets that are wet from the rain, and they don't. There's a lady that I'm bringing her a tent tomorrow. I just my heart broke for her because she got evicted, and it was a series of things that weren't actually her fault. It was the landlord that she was living place. He didn't pay his bills, so they took his place, so she gets kicked out. And she's like, I don't have enough money to put a down payment on something else, whatever. So I gave her a little bit, plus got her some food. I'm bringing her a tent tomorrow morning after breakfast. But my point is, now this is a woman. She's almost 80 years old, literally living in the woods, freezing. And if you met her a month ago, she had an apartment. She's somebody's grandmother and everything else. And shame on her family for letting that be. But my heart breaks for her. But yeah. I'm looking at it. I'm like, there's people like her that really need it now. It might be a Band-Aid until they can get there. But if you're leaving it, getting out of your Toyota on your cell phone and everything to come in and take food when we're running out of food, like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, it's just, people just get skewed. I'll tell you, I've also met some people that were choosing to be homeless and they were happy. They were out there.
I know one person like that in my life.
They were at peace, right? And I have no problem with that either, right? If that's the lifestyle you want to live, there you go. Hey, so when it comes to stories, I've got a few items that people say that make them effective. I think we've hit a few things. We've relatable, right? If you're going to tell a story, it needs to be relatable, memorable, right? Not just like facts and figures, but like no kidding memories that you have, that you value. People probably value.
And I think they should be, to me, when I'm writing a sermon or something, I think they should be authentic. I don't think it should be, let me Google a story about a lady that might match my sermon text. I think you should really pray about it and be like, let's think about where, because if you're over 40 or whatever, like you've experienced some version of everything probably. So at that point, so you should, to me, dive deep into something. And I think the more relatable it is comes from the authenticity, and it should have the humility. If your story ends with you as the hero, it might not necessarily be the best story. Sometimes it is if it's a motivational type of thing, but I will tell you some of the best stories. I've had people come up to me months after a sermon and say, Chris, that still stuck with me forever. Yeah. And it was a story of how bad I did it, how I screwed up, how it was wrong, how I'm embarrassed or ashamed of how I did it. And I'm not afraid to tell that story because it doesn't define me, and it doesn't have to define you either.
I would tell you, for me, very similar. I just always try to make sure whatever, because I tell a lot of my own because I want to make sure I'm speaking on myself, but I try to always remind myself that it was through the grace of God. It was through my faith. It was through something bigger than me that gave me the strength to come through that. And I try to always think about that as I'm preparing whatever I'm doing, because I tell the kids, you got to have faith and you got to have you got to work, right? I believe that like you've said several times tonight already, we've already earned our forgiveness. We've already earned our being saved. That doesn't mean we don't stop doing our best every day, right? If
Jesus earned it, but yeah.
Great, exactly. And I feel like you've got to put the work in to help you get somewhere, to help to show the world, to help to show God that you really, that you really, really, really do appreciate the opportunities you've been given, and you authentically want to get there, right? And God, if I can do 80%, you can just get me across that 20%, man. And oh, by the way, open yourself up, and you might be impressed at how much really comes at you, right? You might be getting a lot more than you even imagined and can receive, right?
And Brad Newberry, Brad, he told me something. He said he spent some time, I don't remember who, it was like the Quakers or something like that, Pennsylvania or something. He had spent some time with them, and he said their motto is very simple. Hearts for God, hands for work. And he said it summed up the way they lived. And so everything was for the glory of God, and that meant you have to work. And the one thing that stands out to me, particularly in Protestant expression of Christianity, is we're not a works-based religion. There's nothing I can do to earn salvation. Only Jesus can do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're honest, Protestantism is a retroactive works-based religion, because the reality is, if you know you're saved, retroactively now you're going to want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. So you are going to wake up every day, and as the Bible says, you should put your hands to the plow. And whatever work God has given you to do, you do it with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength for his glory. And so he is glorified when we are working. And it's not that we're working for our salvation. It's that we know that we don't deserve salvation. Because of that, retroactively, we are trying to do our best to be the change we want to see in the world, as they say. And I think that's a great motto: heart to God's, hands for work. And I think that tells you how to live eternally and how to live in the present.
And, I think about a person who gets a brand new job, and so they got the job. You're hired,
right?
You got the job,
right?
All you got to do is now come to work every day and put the work in,
right?
And you keep the job,
right?
It's when you stop doing those things and you start taking it for granted, and you start becoming complacent, and you start possibly losing focus, that maybe you start making decisions that consequentially might put you in a space where you no longer get to keep that job, right? And I feel like that for people, complacency is one of our greatest weaknesses. Right?
I don't know that word. It doesn't, honestly, it's not in my dictionary, but I believe my dad told me when I was a kid, always do the work of the job ahead of you. Yeah. So if I got hired for job A and job B is the next rung, the day I get hired, I'm already doing job B's work. And when I get hired to B, I'm doing C's work, and so on, and if you're an entrepreneur, that means you're pushing the boundaries every day.
Yeah, no, again, when you're leading 185 people, right, every day, complacency is one of your number one enemies, right? And friction loss, right? Siloing of information, people not trusting, like these are all things we've got to worry about. And I try to remind people, like, do not lose the edge that you got when you had when you first got the opportunity. Don't, the day you got saved, keep that faith.
Right. Where's that fire? Where's that fire you had the day you realized you were in Christ?
Where's that faith? Right? Where's that faith? Let's have that faith today. Yeah. Some more things real quick. So through stories, you could share inspiration, which is my favorite word. I love inspiration over motivation. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Motivation dies. It's because it's externally, it's an external influence or whatever, and it'll die when your discipline gets worn out.
I agree.
Inspiration is when you are on fire for something bigger than you, and you can fight through the sun.
And to the Greeks, right, the muses, right, you got to find what inspires you, because it's through finding your muse, right, your why, right, finding your muses that you'll get the inspiration that will then result in the motivation to go out and do the thing, right? And I think that that's a critical life skill that people need to be able to learn to utilize, to leverage, to conquer things. And oh, by the way, you have to find how to continuously replenish it, right? And how to continuously replenish yourself so that you don't feel like not doing what the things that make you happy.
So here's a quick observation, and I'm asking. I don't necessarily have the answer, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, anytime I'm talking with people that are counselors, coaches, pastors, business leaders, they all say the same things that we're saying right now. I don't care if you're a household name like Tony Robbins or Simon Sinek, or if you're here, you and I are in Ocala talking, whatever. If you come from the cloth of you are naturally a mentor to people. You're naturally a leader. You know, as you're talking, I'm like, well, you're not saying anything I don't already know and live by. And I'm not saying anything you already don't know and live by. But then my question is it only people that already are called to live by those standards that become coaches and counselors and mentors? And then the other 90% maybe don't have that DNA capability? Because I know I look at people and I'm like, why are none of you living up to your standards? Like we talked about earlier. And as I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, well, yeah, you and I both already know these things intuitively. And it's like, but maybe the other people don't know it intuitively and maybe they can't grasp it. And I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation.
Well, and I think for me, the other thing is I look at what are they doing day for day, pound for pound, right? For example, I'll hear some people out there on the world, or I'll read a book of somebody who's saying all the right words, but when's the last time they led a team to success? When's the last time they actually put themselves in the job and did the thing? Because, you know, I know it gets tiring. People want to take the pack off at some point. They tell everybody else how they walked uphill both ways in the snow, and it was always harder for them. But I get up tomorrow morning and I go back to work with 185 kids, right? And I go out there and I do the thing. I was on the ship. I remember being in the Navy and I was getting higher and higher in these positions, and I thought, this is not where it's at for me.
Right.
I do not want to be at the upper part of this team that we're just up here freaking manipulating all the people on the chessboard. I want to be with the people that are getting the work done. And then, oh, by the way, I want to share with people that while you and I have heard this stuff before, it's amazing how many people have never heard some of these messages. And as you take these messages to them, you then connect them to not just optimism. You don't only just connect them to discipline, how to identify, how to figure out my team's alignment, how do I get people, how many managers don't know how to coach their people, right? How many managers don't exactly right, which is why if they can get some development, get some help.
Leaders can manage, but managers often can't lead.
I agree. But I think that not all leaders will allow themselves to become managers.
I don't want to be. I don't want to be.
But most managers will willingly learn how to lead, right? And that's
fair.
The nuance, right? That's the nuance. Because again, I get your perspective, right? I'm both, right? Because the United States Navy trained me to take my natural abilities as a leader. Then they taught me to also manage projects, right? How to manage production. And so leadership is the vision and management's how we get it done.
Yeah.
Right?
So I can't stand management. So I hire other people to work for me to do that. Because to me, if I have to manage a grown adult, I don't want you near me.
Yeah.
I'll serve you. I'll put you on the other side of the table and I'll coach you. I'll mentor you. I'll feed you. But if I'm actually working with you and you're my inner group and I have to manage you, you're not in my inner group anymore.
Well, and I think that's where a lot of people find leadership such a challenge, because leadership without management is going to be complicated. Because you can only lead people to the water. You can't make them drink. Right? Shoving their head underwater and telling them to breathe is no longer accepted in the world,
be.
Right? And so it's hard. It's super hard, which is why I'm passionate about it, and which is why I love to do it every day, because I love it. It keeps you sharp. It keeps my edge sharp. It keeps my mind clear. And then while we have these conversations, this is just as much for you and I as it is for anybody else out there in the world, right? Because we're exchanging ideas, we're exchanging information. You're giving me some good, you're filling my cup. Right. And so then when I get it back up and I go back out tomorrow in the real world and I actually work with all these students of mine or my team members or anybody that I'm fortunate enough to work with in my leadership space, right? I'll be able to use this energy to help them. Yeah. And then, oh, by the way, we'll come back and we'll do it again and we'll talk about some more things. And then away we go. And I think that's what people need to understand. That's life. That's life. Life is going out, doing the things you're supposed to do, with the gifts you've been given by God. And to your other point, this is my gift, right? My creative ability. I don't paint. I don't draw. I don't make music. I don't dance, right? I work with people. I get through to people that people don't want to get through to.
I do too.
And somehow I manage to get through to them, and I give them ideas and opportunities to go out and do great things. And then they do. And it's super awesome. And what I now like to do is I was trained to do organizations, right? So big organizational structures where you've got actual lines of communication and delegation and teaching managers how to coach and managers how to listen and managers how to trust and CEOs how to recognize what the real problems are. And then, but if you can just work with the team you got, you can probably go a long way. Don't just let people leave you because they don't get because we all want to grow. We need the development. Everybody wants growth. Everybody wants development. And I believe that a lot of people are not getting it at work. They're just working for money. And that's just not enough, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I think we're about to wrap this one up, bro.
I didn't know if we even started or if we were just talking before the show.
So. I think that we've got a lot of good stuff here. I think we can talk about storytelling all night long, right? I think we did a lot of good examples of it. I think that, communicating with people, you're going to have emotional connection. We're going to simplify complicated ideas through storytelling. So you can draw these parallels, use metaphors to get the point across. You're going to build trust. You're going to humanize the message. These are all the things you can do through storytelling. And again, whether you're a parent, whether you're a pastor, whether you are a boss, a manager, an entrepreneur, learning how to communicate, especially with stories, will help you get your points across. And if someone ever starts telling you a story, listen, because they're sharing a piece of their journey with you.
So I'll give you my two concluding thoughts then. I will tell you this. One, I'm very blessed because most of my adult life has literally just been storytelling. I get new clients weekly, and I have to get to know them, whether they're retirees wanting to talk to me about their legacy and their kids and their dreams for their grandkids, or their business owners trying to tell me their vision and how we can get there. Those are my two types of interactions other than pastoral stuff. So in my business world, every week, every day, I have 5 to 8, 10 people a day that I sit across the table from, and I just listen to their dreams. And then my job is to help guide them towards those dreams financially, whether it be their business or their legacy. And it's such a blessing. And I've done that now for like 27 years in different shapes and sizes. And I look back and I tell my clients, they're like, why do you do this? So I'm like, I love it. I literally get to spend my entire life hearing new stories. Half my retired clients are telling me stories about their war when they were 20, World War II or whatever. Or I'm listening to stories about Vietnam now with some newer clients. And like, I'm hearing these things, and then I'm hearing the vision for their kids and the nonprofit they hope to leave money to and why. Or my entrepreneurs and the impact and changes they want to make. And I'm like, I get to hang out with 5 to 8 new people every day and hear their dreams and then be an instrument to help them get there. And that's my life. Like, how cool is that? It's all storytelling. And and the easiest way for me to connect with them is storytelling. So I share stories back and forth. And I remember when I was 20 something, I read the book Story Selling, and it said, forget everything you know about sales tactics and just learn how to tell stories. And I did that. And the rest of my life, I don't get into the stock market. I don't get into the PE ratios, the alphas, the betas, the standard deviation. Do I know that stuff? Yes. Do you care? No. But if I ask you, tell me a little bit more about how the impact you want to leave for your grandkids, and they start tearing up about how they want to make sure that they get whatever, and we end up hugging, and then I'm like, I'm going to help you get there.
Yep.
But they never asked me about all the other number stuff. They didn't care, and it doesn't matter. The story is everything.
You, right? Like I think for me, I try to get to know everybody that's in front of me, especially when I'm with my team, because the more I can learn about why you're here in this space, the more I can understand how I can better help you. Then once I can figure out how I can better help you, serve you, like you say, right? Once I figure out how I can better serve you, I'm going to then make sure you understand how you can better serve me.
Yeah.
But once we can lay that on top of the other one, though, we're going to be on the same team.
Amen.
And we're going to do great things, right? And as long as we can stay aligned, we're going to do good, right? And I think that's critical.
I love that.
And the more you can learn from them, and then when you remember those things, about their, those key memories, right, the more they're going to be like, man, he really remembers. How do you remember all those things? I remember more about what you told me in the story than I might remember your name.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
so many people, but I'll remember the story. So
I have people saved in my phone by their story. And I'll put their first name, and then in parentheses, I'll put the guy who told me about his crazy dog. And that way, I have, I think, almost 7,000 people on my cell phone now because I know so many. And when somebody reaches out to me that I met twice and I haven't talked to in 6 months, and they're like, Chris, I got a question, and you're the only guy I know can help me. And it pops up on my phone, and I see the name. It's the guy who told me about his crazy dog. I'm like, oh, hey, Steve, how are you? How's it been, man? How's the dog? But that's how I save people on my phone.
Hey, man, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Hey, do me a favor. Don't jump off. I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream, but I'd like to talk with you real quick before we go ahead and move on, okay?
Okay.
Hey, thank you, everybody that listens to this story, this podcast. Hopefully you enjoy. Hopefully we'll talk to you later. Yeah.
And I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this.